After the global IT outage caused by CrowdStrike about a month ago, their shares have dropped by 25%, and they're claiming that competitors like SentinelOne and Trellix are further tarnishing CrowdStrike's name in order to gain new customers. How are their competitors swooping in to steal their business, and is that the right move? Last Tuesday, a Microsoft update intended to secure Windows systems left numerous dual-boot Linux devices unable to start. How can Linux users affected by this update restore their dual-boot systems without compromising their security? There is a new macOS malware that is linked to North Korean hacking groups called TodoSwift that replicates the dangerous tactics seen in notorious cyber threats like Rust Bucket and Candy Corn. How is the TodoSwift malware distributed, and what can Apple users do to protect themselves? And finally, there's another severe security flaw in a WordPress plugin called GiveWP that is putting over 100,000 websites at risk of remote code execution attacks. We're going to talk about that as you continue listening to the Daily Decrypt. CrowdStrike is facing backlash after their untested update took down what seems to be half the world over a month ago. As a part of this backlash, CrowdStrike is claiming that major competitors like SentinelOne and Trellix are acting sort of as like ambulance chasers, trying to swoop in and steal customers. CrowdStrike claims that these companies have been further tarnishing CrowdStrike's name in order to convince customers to leave CrowdStrike's service and move over to them. They're even making the outlandish claim that their products could not suffer the same fate as CrowdStrike's did, which, as I see it, is the definition of bad juju. Putting that out in the world like, oh, we are immune to something like this, gives the universe ammunition to prove you wrong, right? I don't like to jinx things like that. Just don't say it. You're not sure if it's true, don't say it. Now, the only reason this could be true is if companies like SentinelOne and Trellix don't update their products or don't have the same visibility that CrowdStrike has, neither of which are worth leaving CrowdStrike for, because you're going to be settling for less security than you would be getting with CrowdStrike to try to prevent something that you honestly can't prevent. But another unfortunate circumstance is that investors seem to believe these claims about SentinelOne and Trellix because SentinelOne shares have shot up by 19%, and Palo Alto Networks has also gained 13%. Meanwhile, CrowdStrike's market has plummeted by nearly 25%. And as someone who works for a direct competitor of CrowdStrike, I would be pretty disappointed in my company if we were tarnishing their name. It's just not a good tactic to have as a competitor. We're a security community. The people who work for CrowdStrike are my friends. You know, I'm their friend. We're all in this together. So, of course, we got to make our bucks, but let's support each other as much as we can. That's good karma. And good things come back to those who are good. Microsoft's latest update, Patch Tuesday, has caused a major headache for Linux users. All right, here's what happened. Last Tuesday, Microsoft rolled out an update to patch a 2-year-old vulnerability in Grub, the bootloader for many Linux devices. This vulnerability had a high severity rating of 8.6 out of 10 and could allow hackers to bypass Secure Boot, which is a very critical security feature. But here's the kicker. Microsoft knew this update wouldn't work for dual boot systems, and it wasn't supposed to reach systems that are running both Windows and Linux, but instead it did and left many of these systems unable to boot into Linux, leaving the classic Windows error message, quote, "Something has gone seriously wrong. Thanks, Windows." So this goes along with what we had mentioned in the previous article about CrowdStrike pushing their updates and blue screening many devices. We don't want that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen, but it's almost unavoidable in security that requires constant updates. So Microsoft patched a security issue. Speed is important. And even though they did the dogfooding and realized that dual boot systems were not compatible with this update, it still reached these dual boot systems. There's just so many ways that this can go wrong. You want to do what you can to prevent it, but no software company is immune to this, not even Microsoft. So if this has happened to you, one temporary fix is to disable Secure Boot, but this would likely compromise your security. So a better option is to delete the SBAT Microsoft pushed out. And for more instructions on how to do this, you can check out the article by Ars Technica in the show notes below for specific steps that you can take. There is a new macOS malware strain called TodoSwift that has been linked to North Korean hacking groups. Researchers found that TodoSwift behaves similarly to other North Korean malware like Rustbucket and Candy Corn. These malware strains are known for targeting the crypto industry to steal valuable assets. So how does TodoSwift work? It starts as a seemingly innocent app named To Do Tasks. When you open it, it shows you a harmless-looking Bitcoin-related PDF from Google Drive. But behind the scenes, it secretly downloads and executes a malicious binary from a domain controlled by the hackers. If you use macOS or you're in the crypto space, this malware could target your data and cryptocurrencies. TodoSwift's sophisticated multi-stage infection chain can access and exfiltrate your data, terminate processes, and execute commands on your computer. This malware also uses trusted platforms like Google Drive to distribute the malicious files in order to maintain a sense of legitimacy. So it's important to remember that even legitimate services like Google can be used for malicious purposes. And trust me, I know the struggle of finding a good to-do list app. It seems like none of them do everything that I want them to do. Some sync across devices using the cloud, but don't allow for more complex notes within each task or subtasks or whatever. So I'm constantly on the hunt for a new to-do list app. If you're like me, be sure you don't download TodoSwift. And the final news story is one that is very familiar, which is WordPress plugin is vulnerable. So there's a WordPress plugin called GiveWP that puts over 100,000 websites at risk of remote code execution attacks. This vulnerability is tracked as CVE 2024-5932 with a critical CVSS score of 10 out of 10 and affects all versions of this plugin before 3.14.2. This vulnerability was discovered by a security researcher with a cool username I'm not going to try to pronounce, and the flaw exploits the give title parameter, allowing attackers to inject malicious PHP objects, which essentially allows attackers to execute malicious code, potentially hijacking your entire site and accessing the sensitive information that lives within it. This specific vulnerability is news, but updating WordPress and WordPress's consistent vulnerabilities is not so much news. WordPress is one of the most accessible and easiest, cheapest, all of that stuff for web hosting, but it is also the most vulnerable. Anyone can create these plugins that can be installed on your WordPress site, and there's not a whole lot of tooling around automatic updates. In fact, most plugins don't have automatic updates enabled by default. You have to go in and do that. So if you're a WordPress admin, I highly recommend going in, making sure you're actually using all of your plugins, going and enabling auto updates, and scheduling in a regular audit of those plugins because you're up against a lot trying to secure a WordPress site.
This has been the Daily Decrypt. If you found your key to unlocking the digital domain, show your support with a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It truly helps us stand at the frontier of cyber news. Don't forget to connect on Instagram or catch our episodes on YouTube. Until next time, keep your data safe and your curiosity alive.